Hello, welcome to a very timely and exciting edition of Meet the Solutionaries on greentv.com. We are just coming out of what was an amazingly busy, eventful Climate Week. That is the week that the UN General Assembly gathers in New York, and all these sub-conferences around it take place. And there's so much going on, and there's so much to cover. As a journalist, and the woman who really organized it all and is at the center of it all somehow found time for Green TV. So thank you so much. I really appreciate being with us, Helen Clarkson, and you are the Chief Executive Officer of the Climate Group. Tell us about that. I know you're London-based, but you also have quite a growing presence, I would say, in the United States. I've covered, I think, the last 5 climate weeks, and I've been at your hub for most of those, and you really seem to be everywhere. And just want to congratulate you on what seemed to be, at least from my perspective, a very smoothly run, newsworthy, timely event.
Great, thanks. Yes, so Climate Group is an international non-profit, as you said. Our headquarters are in London, but we have offices in the US, in Delhi, in Beijing. You know, those are the parts of the world, those are the economies with the highest levels of emissions. And from London, we also cover Europe, and we've got an office in Amsterdam. So as a non-profit, we're mission driven, and our mission is to drive climate action fast. So we really think about acceleration and how do we really continue to push on urgency and the speed of progress. Mostly the way that we do that is through building these big coalitions of actors, companies, and state and regional governments who make commitments, and then we use those commitments to drive engagement with supply side of markets and policymakers, really aiming to shift markets and policies. And we've always had communications as a really key part of our theory of change and how we want to communicate positive climate action stories, but also connect companies, connect governments, connect all sorts of actors together in order to, again, learn and accelerate and drive everything faster. And so Climate Week NYC, we've been running, actually, I think this is the 14th. We decided to do it alongside the UN General Assembly, as you mentioned, because, you know, when Climate Week started, there was still an argument about what we should be doing at all on climate action, and was this a business a priority. And so when the Climate Group started Climate Week, the idea was to really get it in front of world leaders and say, look, you know, you're here, you're in New York, let's have climate. That's a critical conversation to have alongside UNGA. And I always sort of joke that, you know, if you're in New York this week, you'll get stuck in a lot of traffic jams. I mean, I go everywhere by subway, but if you're a world leader and you're in your, you know, nice vehicle and you're stuck in a traffic jam, I want you to look out the window and see a poster that says Climate Week NYC, getting it done, has some messaging about climate. So it's really about putting in front of those leaders. Now, the conversation has changed over the 14 years that we've done it. It was moved from sort of making the case that we should be doing things to, you know, our theme this year and last year as well, getting it done. It's really about the practicalities of how we go from commitments into action and bringing together leaders who can learn from one another, who can inspire each other, but also have some sort of really critical conversations, again, that hopefully drives acceleration.
I have not been to any of the COPs yet, but how does this compare? How does this feel different, other than the fact that you're kind of organizing this event?
Yeah, so it's a lot more pressure on us. The COP is a different sort of beast. That's much more about, you know, at the center of the COP, you have the climate negotiations. It's very much a UN moment. The UN sets up all the, you know, the infrastructure. It feels like a UN event. You've got people there from all over the world. And at the center of that are critical negotiations. And kind of what we do and others do is, it's sort of a sidebar, but it's important. It's kind of that civil society voice coming to COP, again, with the world leaders saying, look, we're all here, we're doing things. I think this week is more practical. You haven't got those negotiations happening. You've got the UN happening and people keeping an eye on that. But I think this is much more about the kind of action part of climate action, and probably the COP is more on that commitment and sort of high level structure setting.
Is it possible that there's a little less world pressure, political pressure here than at the COP, because expectations get so high, and then it always seems like right before each COP they're brought low? Okay, we're not going to really do what we need to do.
Yeah, so you don't have that. You're right, there isn't that meta narrative, and in that sense, Climate Group, we get to set the narrative, and we get to sort of say, right now, I say that there's 400 plus events across the week. Of those, Climate Group ourselves run about, say, 10%, sort of 40, I think we had 60 hours of programming we ourselves put on. But then there's these hundreds of events, and we want them to be about all levels of society. Our events very focused on leaders. And I say a lot of kind of some plenary sessions where we have, we had Gavin Newsom speaking and sort of motivating the crowd. We had leaders from the World Trade Organization. We had representatives coming from Morocco, from the Egyptian COP team, from the team for next year's UA. So we try and make it quite global. But again, it's very much those
Prince William. Almost had Prince William, but he had a.
There was something else happening this week that rather drew some attention away. What? Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
That knocked a lot of climate coverage off the air, but that's another story.
It did, and yeah. That I think one of the things we feel is that you shouldn't really be we shouldn't be having to choose between different sorts of coverage, but okay, that did have a sort of small impact. But I think we have had good attention across the rest of the week, and the important conversations we wanted to host happened, and we, as I said, get to kind of set that theme, and that overarching theme for us this year is getting it done, about action. And then underneath that, we had 3 key ideas we wanted to explore. So accountability, who's holding whom to account; justice, in whose name are we taking action, is that fair; and urgency, so continuing to push the pace on climate action, because nothing, even though good things are happening, nothing is fast enough.
No, and there was some news. The president of the World Bank, of course, was a big topic of conversation. I was in the room at the New York Times when Vice President Gore did something kind of uncharacteristic, spoke spontaneously and quite boldly in saying that he should be gone. And of course, then brought Malpass, is that how you pronounce his name? David Malpass, to walk back his position. The first one being he really couldn't say because he's not a scientist, which of course my answer is always then listen to the scientists if you're not. The head of the World Bank at this moment, as the planet's burning in 2022, to have to be pushed to say that greenhouse gases do in fact cause climate change. It's pretty appalling, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's very depressing. I think, one thing in the last few years, particularly since Paris, so that was 6-7 years ago, 2015, so 7 years ago, we really felt like the argument had been won. And I think, if you go and talk to business leaders, they've really moved on. There isn't a big debate amongst business leaders now about whether climate's happening, what the causes are, or the extent. Most people can open their eyes and look out the window. Look at the summer we've had. You've had heat waves across Europe. I include the UK. We had our hottest ever day. Look at what's happening in Pakistan. Look what's happening in Puerto Rico. It's right in front of us, and this isn't a future problem. And I think what has been really tricky in the last couple of years, particularly this year with the geopolitics, is the moment something happens, like the illegal invasion of Ukraine, the fossil fuel industry doesn't wait a minute before it starts pumping out misinformation and saying, well, obviously then the answer are fossil fuels, and it's that the troops have barely crossed the border. So I think that's really difficult to be on the other side of, because you can just see the money and the resources that go into really trying to protect the status quo. And I think that is frustrating. You're getting this disconnect now between leaders of those big institutions and leaders of government for whom it's still a political issue, versus business leaders who are like, we want to take action on this. We want our company to exist in 20-30 years time. That's the backdrop against which to do it. We want to replan, and what we really want is policymakers to come with us and help us set a sort of level playing field and set the rules of the game in which we act.
It's funny and not funny how quickly the deniasphere, as I call it, reacts. I live in Austin, Texas, and was there during Snowmageddon, record freeze, and in less than 24 hours after it hit, Governor Abbott was blaming solar and wind power, which was of course nonsense. And like, if they could act in a positive way so quickly, wouldn't that be nice? It's quite, again, I guess the word appalling is coming up again. Not to dwell on that, but it seems to be a phenomenon in certain
agreed,
country and elsewhere.
And you'll know much better than I do. How much wind power there is in Texas. Why not be proud of it? Why not understand that the critical role of wind? And I think that's frustrating as well, where you see good things happening and people unwilling to shout and tell those stories, and we always want to tell the positive stories for whatever reason.
And we will get back to Climate Week in a second, I promise, but I just wanted to, before I forget, get your opinion of Liz Truss.
I think we put out a report this week about renewable energy in the G20, and particularly directed at corporates. How easy is it to you know, how easy the regime in each of the G20 countries for corporates wanting to buy renewable energy. Actually, the UK got an A, and Canada was one of the lower. I can't remember the D or E was the lowest, but Canada was in that bottom group. Now, Canada has a lot of renewable energy, but has never locked that regime into legislation. What the UK has, and is one of a few countries that has this, you know, the 2010 Climate Change Act, which sets legally binding targets for a government. And so when you then compare those regimes, actually for businesses, they do know the direction of travel in the UK. I think we're going to see that tested to some extent. How resilient is that? But that legislation is there. We have the frameworks, and I'm sort of optimistic that what that does, and the reason why it got a good score in that report, is it's fairly robust to changes in governments versus places, you know, and you know, the Inflation Reduction Act will hopefully do something similar here, where you can lock that down with legislation. It does make it harder for the deniers to come in and change things and turn things over. And so I think structurally, I'm optimistic. I think that some of the appointments that she's made in the cabinet are really disappointing, because we know there's a huge opportunity, and this government in the UK really talking about growth and wants to restart growth. We know one of the best engines for economic growth is the green economy, our green jobs. And if you go to the public and ask them what they don't want fracking, and they do want clean sources of power, and they want, actually people want onshore wind. So there's a lot of weirdness in, you know, I think going against the grain of where the public are, that I just don't understand the political expediency there.
Well, we don't understand it in this country, and I'm sorry to hear that it's elsewhere, but I know it is, and not universally, but certain corners, certain political parties. So let's get back to Climate Week. Job well done. Did it meet your expectations, exceed? Where did it come up short? How are you feeling at the end of this very full week?
Yeah, apart from tired, feeling really good actually. And as I say, because we try and set that conversation, and I think we did have the conversations, I had loads of good feedback. You know, for me, I get the feedback on both levels. How did the team perform, and how did we do as an organization, and how did the week go? And I think we've been good on both fronts. But what really was good for us is we did a lot of quite kind of closed door, high level conversations, again in line with our theme, where you could get CEOs and corporate sustainability officers together to, behind closed doors, have a conversation about how are you actually doing this? What can you tell me about? How do I do this exact thing? And I think some people will be like, well, you know, terrible behind closed doors. But actually, if we want to make progress, creating a space in which people can meet their peers and learn from one another, I think is really, really critical. And so I think what's really important across Climate Week is that we have all these different sorts of activations. We've got things that are very public and are people putting their, you know, nailing their colours to the mast, also the opportunity to learn from one another and motivate one another. And I think that, you know, when I think about what motivates me, it's hearing about what's happening, it's understanding what work is going on, that people aren't just sitting down and waiting for governments to act, but actually getting on with things. And I think we've really seen that across this week.
Do you really feel a new sense of urgency this year compared to even last year?
Yeah, I think the urgency is kind of carried on from last year. I think the big difference this year is obviously the geopolitics, and you know, that's really biting. Even with I think the pandemic, what that did was sort of show people that you can make big, substantial changes quickly, and that there was a lot of mythology around, well, we can't. You know, I'd always sort of said, in the face of people saying, well, we can't ever really change things. You know, look how quickly something like the iPhone came along, just completely changed our lives, absolutely. But the pandemic is a much better example of that, because it was so much bigger, it was more structural. You could see how quickly governments move when they get into crisis mode.
And the media covered it wall to wall and connected the dots and emphasized the urgency and the dire nature of it.
Absolutely. And everyone now, I think, at least really understands radical change. So I'm not going to say the pandemic is a good thing. It was terrible, and you know, had a huge impact for so many people and on a personal level. But in sort of that kind of structural narrative about, oh, change is possible, it was quite helpful to be able to say, look, we can do things. I think what's happened this year, obviously, with what's going on in the world, we've got the kind of coming out of the pandemic and trying to kind of kickstart economies again, and then we're into this war in Europe. You know, there are opportunities around accelerating the renewable and accelerating the energy transition, and we have to be able to take those. And I think we have, but it's frustrating. We have to kind of keep fighting this denialist fight, which pops up, and I don't understand, just on a human level, why people would, want the end of the planet.
Yeah, it's kind of odd, isn't it? They're too busy doing what?
Yeah,
especially parents and grandparents. But
yeah,
it's mind-blowing, actually. So one of the themes I heard repeatedly and was very happy to do so was loss and damage. The global south and reparations needed. What happened behind closed doors, to whatever extent you can share on that front?
I think I don't have lots of it in depth on that, but I think you can hear it coming up the conversation, and that's a critical conversation going into COP. I think that there is a lot more boldness about calling that out now. I'm not sure people don't like the word reparations, but I think people do understand, look at Pakistan and what's happened there, and look at the countries that are vulnerable to floods, and what they lack is money. And I think, I said right at the start of the week, you can be absolutely shocked by what you're seeing coming out of Pakistan. You cannot pretend to be surprised by it. And I think this call, we want to sort of start pushing more as we go into COP to pay up the money that's been promised. And that's the real, problem, is that we've promised money. We know that this needs to be done, and it's not being delivered at anything like the pace that it needs to be. And what that's allowing is that you're hearing this conversation come out of Africa. Look at what's happening in Congo. We're selling some of the rights there, and the oil companies moving in. Is it allows a story to come out of Africa that says, well, we can't even talk about the energy transition because we just don't have energy. Why shouldn't we exploit our fossil fuel resources? Now, on a logical and kind of moral basis, of course, you should be entitled to grow and do as you can, but we know that will lock countries into an energy system that will be very, very hard to get out of, and put them behind other parts of the world like Europe, which is moving off and onto renewables. And once again, you get the same way Europe is doing better for that reason. So I think we have to really understand, and maybe the pandemic has shifted a bit of understanding on this, that what happens in one part of the globe affects you in another part of the globe. And we just got to keep making those connections.
The other connections that need to be made, in my strong view, is, when these disasters, extreme weather events happen, whether it's Pakistan or Puerto Rico now as we speak, the media leaves and then the story is forgotten. But look what this has done to the lives of people in just places alone. And that's part of the problem, isn't it? Because, I mean, there are almost no words to describe what's happening.
Exactly.
And we don't even know the full extent of Puerto Rico. But once again, it's bad. 5 years almost to the day, I understand, after Hurricane Maria. Hopefully they've been able to shore up their buildings to some extent, but we'll know when the dust settles. But and we're seeing them almost regularly, right? These monster extreme weather events.
Yeah, and you're right. And I actually heard a BBC report earlier in the week where they went back to Pakistan, or they had, their local correspondent, and the water hasn't gone down. And I think, it's so easy to take your eye off it. In the UK, we just had wall-to-wall coverage of the Queen for 10 days, which I get it. I don't really get it, but I'm sorry, I don't.
Queen, though, I don't want to be disrespectful.
No, exactly. I'm like, that's why I say I get it. I sort of don't know. It was a lot.
Following the procession every step of the way. I mean, like, there wasn't really news there, but yet they kept trying to chat about it.
Yeah, and I don't mind the bits where they follow the actual things that happen, but it was the 8 days between things happening where it was absolutely wall-to-wall, and that means that we take our eye off the rest of the world. And I think that is irresponsible when so much is happening. And as you say, the media goes in and gets those initial pictures, and it's just this devastation that's left behind. And to hear that, all those weeks later that the waters haven't really gone down very much, or people are still, the amount of people who are not in their homes again. And it's just unimaginable.
Malaria is now breaking out in Pakistan. I saw some pictures, and it is devastating. So God save the Queen. Now God save the King. I say God save Mother Nature. God save the planet.
Mother Nature and humanity, because it's really about our ability to continue living on the planet. And I think the other point is, for those, again, I don't quite understand how these dots haven't been joined for all those people who are sort of anti-immigration. Where do you think this is going? So that's the frustration.
Yeah, and it's sort of like the hypocrisy, not to get off on a tangent here, but certain politicians who are against abortion, and yet they don't want to support, children after they're born. It's they're fine aborting the future of life on the planet by ignoring climate change. No Republican senators in our country voted for climate action in 2022. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sure you agree, not to dwell on that, but it's got to change. It's just got to. Even if and have that opposition, it's still an epic undertaking.
Absolutely. And actually, just you saying that reminded me that one of the big breakthroughs in the last year has actually been children bringing this topic to their parents' attention. And we've had teenagers and their parents might be decision makers or kind of connected. And we really have, we have heard that over the last few years from business people. It's like, I need to sit at the dinner table with my kids and they want to know what I'm doing. And I think, some people have looked at those school strikes and been a bit sniffy. They've made a huge change. And I think we just got to keep those conversations alive, keep the pressure on. But there has been an absolute change in the minds of business leaders that we've seen over the last sort of 5 to 10 years. And so part of our job and part of the job of Climate Week is to just keep allowing that to transact into real change.
So going into COP, where are things? Are they where they should be? We're just a little over a month away.
About 6 weeks, I think. Well, things are never where they need to be. So it's questions, how far off are they? I don't know. I think that, the way that COPs go through a kind of cycle, there are the big ones, sort of Paris, they're on a kind of 5-year cycle. There's the global stocktake, which will happen next year. These COPs in between can get very technical. I think the big conversation that needs to happen, as we were just talking about, is financing. That's the conversation that Egypt wants to push as the president. That is a very good conversation to be having. And so I think what we need to do with the next few weeks is to support the Egyptian presidency in keeping to push this story around financing, loss and damage, adaptation, and see if we can make progress on some of those issues. So nothing's ever it needs to be on climate, but I think that's where the focus is really going to switch in the next few weeks.
And are you hearing enough focus on mitigation versus adaptation, or is it about where it should be? Because that goes back and forth.
I think I don't even know what the balance should be. I mean, I think it just needs to be all of it. And so much, in a way, we've kind of distinguished these domains and they're very overlapping. So I think in a way, getting away from that will be quite useful. But it's clear that we need to get back on, we need to get on track to 1.5. We've seen this report in the last few weeks about tipping points, thinking about that, thinking how close we are to some of these tipping points. So it's no question we're going to have to adapt. We're already having to adapt, but it's just, how quickly can we go on both, I think now.
I was at the Solutions House last evening, and the German scientist, climate scientist extraordinaire, Johann Rockstrom spoke, and it was sobering, even though, I know what's going on, what's going on, hearing it from one of the top, not the top climate scientists in the world, how worried he is, it really at home. It kind of shook me, and I'm around this stuff all the time.
Yeah, he's very clear-sighted.
Yeah, very articulate. Okay, so I just want to ask you if you have any parting thoughts. Again, job well done. I don't know how so much was planned. I could barely, run around between the different venues. I'm glad that most of the sessions were recorded. We should mention we don't have time. I believe that most of the recordings will be available there.
Yeah, I think I think the recordings they should be going up already. There's lots that will start popping out, but I think people can find their way to them via the Climate Week NYC website. No, I think it's been a good week. It is always a reminder that we're not moving. It's sort of both things at the same time. Nothing's enough, as I said, but you can sort of see how much action is happening. You can see how many people care about it. We've had a really, really great response. And so I think there are some bits of hope we can hang on to, but come back to my sort of key themes around accountability, justice, urgency, and those are the big things we need to keep focused on.
Well, I'm really glad to see you having a greater presence in the United States. We need you here.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Well, safe travels back home. And I really appreciate you making time for Green TV. And I want to invite our viewers to please subscribe to our YouTube channel. When we get up to 1,000 viewers, we're about halfway there because we're a new platform. We get to start live streaming. So I could have been running around to all these places reporting live, which maybe it's a good thing I wasn't, but exhausting enough as it was. But thanks for being part of Green TV, our Meet the Solutionary series. It's really an honor to have you, Helen Clarkson. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
And best of luck at COP. We'll be watching. We want to invite everybody to go to greentv.com and subscribe. The more subscribers we get, the sooner we can go live and expand our coverage and become 24/7, because what is more important than talking about how we're going to save ourselves? Not the planet. The planet will be fine. It's us. We need Mother Nature more than she needs us. If you need explanation on that, stay tuned to Green TV. Thanks.